The silence between them began the moment Lucas Ward dismounted his horse outside the weathered cabin near Park City, Utah, and saw the woman in black standing perfectly still in her garden, staring at nothing at all. It was late spring in 1882, and the mountain air still carried a chill that made breath visible in the early morning hours. Lucas had been riding for 3 days straight, delivering a message to a mining operation further north, and his supplies had run dangerously low. He spotted the small homestead tucked against the foothills, and hoped whoever lived there might spare some water and perhaps a bit of food. What he found instead was a woman so lost in her grief that she did not even notice his approach until his shadow fell across the untended vegetable patch. She looked up then, and Lucas saw eyes that were brown and empty, a face that might have been beautiful if it held any expression at all. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark hair pulled back severely from her face. Her black dress was simple but well made, the fabric dusty at the hem from dragging through the dirt. "Madam," Lucas said, removing his hat. He was 26, tall and lean from years of riding, with dark hair that needed cutting and blue eyes that had seen more than their share of hardship. "I apologize for the intrusion. I am heading back toward Salt Lake City and find myself in need of water for my horse. I can pay." The woman looked at him for a long moment, then at his horse, then back at him. She said nothing. She simply turned and walked toward a well near the side of the cabin, her movements mechanical. Lucas followed at a respectful distance, leading his mare. The woman drew water from the well with practiced efficiency, her hands working the rope and bucket without thought. She filled a trough, and Lucas led his horse to it gratefully. He waited for her to speak, to ask who he was or what business he had in these parts, but she remained silent. When the horse had drunk its fill, the woman walked to the cabin door, opened it, and looked back at him once before disappearing inside. Lucas stood uncertain for a moment, then heard sounds from within that suggested she was preparing something. After a few minutes, she emerged with a plate of cold biscuits and dried meat, along with a canteen of fresh water. She handed these to him without a word. "Thank you, madam," Lucas said. "I am grateful. Is there anything I can do to repay your kindness? Any work that needs doing around the place?" For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. She looked around the homestead as if seeing it for the first time in a while. The garden was overrun with weeds. The fence around the small corral had a section that was broken. The cabin itself needed repairs to the roof where several shingles had blown away. She nodded once, slowly, then pointed to the fence. Lucas set down the food and got to work. He had tools in his saddlebags, as any traveling man did, and he set about repairing the fence with steady, practiced movements. The woman returned to the garden and began pulling weeds, her movements still mechanical but purposeful now. They worked in silence, the only sounds the wind through the pines, the occasional call of a bird, and the rhythmic sounds of their labor. When the sun was high overhead, the woman went inside and returned with 2 tin cups of water. She handed one to Lucas and drank from the other, still without speaking. Lucas accepted it gratefully, noting that her hands shook slightly as she held her cup. They sat on the porch steps, not close but not distant either, and drank their water in comfortable silence. "My name is Lucas Ward," he finally said, his voice quiet. "I work as a courier mostly, carrying messages and small packages between settlements. I am based out of Salt Lake City." The woman looked at him, and he saw her mouth open slightly as if she might speak, but no words came. Instead, she looked away, and something in her expression made Lucas understand that speaking was perhaps too difficult right now, too painful. So he simply nodded and said, "You do not need to tell me anything, madam. I understand silence." And he did. Lucas had lost his entire family to cholera 7 years earlier when he was 19. His parents, his two younger sisters, and his infant brother, all gone within a week. He had spent months after unable to speak of it, unable to bear the sound of his own voice saying the words that made it real. He had learned the value of silence then, the way it could be a refuge rather than an absence. They returned to their work. Lucas fixed the fence, then moved on to repairing the roof, climbing up with extra shingles he found in a small shed. The woman continued in the garden, and by the time the sun began its descent toward the mountains, the place looked considerably better. Lucas had also repaired a broken step on the porch and oiled the squeaking hinge on the cabin door. As darkness approached, the woman gestured for him to follow her to a small barn behind the cabin. Inside were two stalls, one empty and one containing a gentle-looking bay gelding. She pointed to the empty stall, indicating that Lucas could stable his horse there for the night. Then she led him back to the cabin and showed him a small room off the main living area, barely more than a closet but with a clean bedroll laid out. Lucas understood he was being invited to stay. "Thank you, madam," he said. "I will be gone at first light and will not trouble you further." But when morning came, Lucas found himself looking at the homestead in the clear dawn light and seeing a dozen more things that needed attention. The woman emerged from the cabin as he was examining the well mechanism, which was making a worrying grinding sound. She looked at him, and he thought he saw the faintest question in her eyes. "The well needs work," he said. "If you would not mind, I could stay another day and fix it. That grinding sound means the pulley is wearing wrong. It will fail soon if it is not addressed." She nodded, and something in her shoulders relaxed slightly. She went back inside and returned with coffee and breakfast. They ate on the porch as the sun rose higher, painting the mountains gold and pink. Lucas found himself watching the way the light touched her face, the way it made her seem less like a ghost and more like a woman again. The days began to follow a pattern. Lucas would work on whatever the homestead needed, and the woman would tend to her garden and animals, cook meals, and bring him water or coffee throughout the day. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together and watch the sun set. Sometimes Lucas would talk, telling stories about places he had been or interesting people he had met. The woman never spoke, but she listened, and gradually he began to see more expression in her face, more presence in her eyes. A week passed, then two. Lucas knew he should return to Salt Lake City, check in with the courier office, pick up new assignments. But he found reasons to stay. The cabin needed chinking between the logs. The small chicken coop needed a new roof. The garden fence needed reinforcing. And underneath all those practical reasons was the simple truth that he did not want to leave this quiet woman alone with her grief. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, Lucas spoke more personally than he had before. "I lost my family when I was 19, he said quietly. "Cholera. It took them all within a week. My mother and father, my sisters Mary and Catherine, and my baby brother James. He was only 6 months old." He paused, his throat tight. "For a long time after, I could not speak about it. Could not speak about anything, really. The words felt too heavy, like they would break something if I let them out. I worked on a ranch for a year and barely said 10 words the whole time. The rancher and his wife, they understood somehow. They gave me space and silence and work to do with my hands." He looked at the woman beside him. She was watching him now, really watching him, and he saw tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "I do not know what you have lost, madam," Lucas continued, "but I know the weight of it. I know how silence can be the only thing that feels safe. So if you need silence, I can give you that. I am good at silence now." The woman drew in a shaky breath, and for a moment Lucas thought she might speak. But instead she reached out and touched his hand where it rested on his knee, just the briefest touch, and then she rose and went inside. But something had shifted between them. Something had been acknowledged and accepted. 3 weeks into his stay, a rider came up the path to the homestead. Lucas was working on building a new storage shed, and the woman was hanging laundry. The rider was an older man, weathered and gray-bearded, dressed in simple ranch clothes. "Beth," the man called out, dismounting. "Beth, I have been worried. You have not been to town in over a month." The woman, Beth, Lucas now knew her name was Beth, set down her laundry basket and walked toward the man. Lucas straightened from his work, watching carefully. "I know you said you wanted to be left alone," the man continued, his voice gentle. "But Martha insisted I ride out and check on you. We have been worried." His eyes moved to Lucas. "Who is this?" "My name is Lucas Ward," Lucas said, walking over. "I was passing through and stopped for water. I have been helping Mrs. He looked at Beth uncertainly. "Mrs. Beth Donovan," the man said, his eyes sharp as they moved between Beth and Lucas. "I am Robert Chen. My wife and I own the ranch about 5 miles east. We have known Beth since she moved here with." He trailed off, looking at Beth with concern. Beth's face had gone pale, but she managed a small nod toward the man, then gestured toward the cabin, an invitation for coffee. Inside, over coffee and the cookies that Beth produced from a tin, Robert explained that he and his wife Martha had been friends with Beth and her husband Thomas. Thomas Donovan had been a miner, one of the many who worked the silver mines in the area. 6 months ago, there had been a collapse in one of the shafts. Thomas and 4 other men had been killed. "Beth has not been the same since," Robert said quietly, while Beth sat at the table with her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, staring into it. "She has not spoken a word since the day we told her about Thomas. The doctor in town said it was the shock of it. We have tried to help, but she wanted to be alone. We have been respecting that, but we check on her when we can." Lucas felt a deep ache in his chest. 6 months. She had been carrying this grief alone for 6 months. "I will stay a while longer," Lucas said, "if that is acceptable to Mrs. Donovan. There is still much work to be done around the place, and I am between assignments at present." Robert looked at Beth. "Is this acceptable to you, Beth? Do you want this man to stay?" Beth looked up, first at Robert, then at Lucas. For a long moment she was silent, and then she nodded, once firmly. "All right then," Robert said. "But Lucas Ward, you should know that Beth is well loved in this community. If you do anything to harm her or take advantage, you will answer to a lot of people." "I understand," Lucas said. "And I give you my word that my intentions are honorable. I am simply trying to help." After Robert left, Beth went out to the garden and began working with more energy than Lucas had seen from her before. He returned to building the storage shed, but his mind was churning. 6 months of silence. 6 months alone with her grief. He understood now the emptiness he had seen in her eyes that first day, the mechanical way she moved through the world. She was surviving, but barely. That evening, as they sat on the porch, Lucas spoke into the comfortable silence. "I think you loved him very much," he said quietly. "Your husband Thomas. I think the pain of losing him took your words away because words were not big enough to hold that much hurt." Beth drew in a sharp breath and her hands clenched in her lap. Lucas continued, his voice gentle. "When I lost my family, I stopped speaking because I could not bear to make it real by talking about it. As long as I did not say the words, I could pretend it had not happened. But silence only works for so long. Eventually, the grief finds other ways out." Beth turned to look at him, and in the fading light he could see the anguish in her face, the tears streaming down her cheeks. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted, and took her hand. She gripped it tightly, so tightly her nails bit into his palm, and she wept silently as the stars began to appear overhead. They sat that way for a long time, Lucas holding her hand while she cried. When the tears finally stopped, she leaned against his shoulder, exhausted, and they stayed that way until the moon was high. Then Lucas walked her to her bedroom door, squeezed her hand once more, and retreated to his small room. Something changed after that night. Beth began to seek out Lucas's presence more actively. She would bring her mending to wherever he was working and sit nearby. She started preparing more elaborate meals, as if she was remembering how to care about such things. And occasionally, when their eyes met, Lucas saw something other than grief in hers. Something that might have been gratitude or companionship, or the earliest stirrings of something more. A month after Robert's visit, Lucas rode into Park City to send a telegram to his employer in Salt Lake City, explaining that he was taking an extended leave. The town was small but bustling with mining activity. Lucas stopped at the general store to purchase supplies, and the woman behind the counter, a kind-faced lady in her 50s, brightened when he mentioned he was staying at the Donovan place. "You must be the man Robert told us about," she said. "Lucas Ward. I am Martha Chen, Robert's wife. I am so glad someone is out there with Beth. We have all been so worried about her." "She is doing better," Lucas said. "Still not speaking, but there is more life in her eyes now." Martha nodded. Thomas was a good man. They had only been married 2 years when the accident happened. They met back east somewhere, Pennsylvania, I think, and came out here to make their fortune. Thomas was so sure the mines would make them rich. She shook her head sadly. He left her with nothing but that homestead and some debts from equipment he had bought. A few of us in town helped pay those off so she would not lose the land. Lucas felt anger stir in his chest, not at Thomas, but at the cruel unfairness of it all. A young couple with dreams, torn apart by an accident in a dangerous mine. "She is fortunate to have friends like you," he said. "We take care of our own out here," Martha said. "And Lucas, thank you for taking care of her. Whatever your reasons for staying, thank you." Lucas returned to the homestead with supplies and a thoughtful expression. As he unpacked the goods, Beth came to help, and their hands brushed as they worked. Lucas felt a jolt at the contact, an awareness that had been growing stronger with each passing day. He was becoming increasingly conscious of Beth as a woman, not just as someone who needed help. The way she moved, the rare, almost smiles she gave when something pleased her, the gentleness in her hands when she tended her garden or her animals. That evening, Lucas made a decision. He sat beside Beth on the porch and spoke carefully. "Beth," he said, using her name for the first time. "I need to be honest with you about something. I have been here for over a month now, and my reasons for staying have changed. At first, I stayed because I saw someone who needed help and I wanted to give it. But now I stay because I want to be here. I want to be near you. I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about work. I look forward to our evenings on this porch more than anything else in my day." He took a breath. "I do not want to burden you with this. I know you are still grieving your husband and you may always love him. That is as it should be. But I needed you to know the truth. If my presence here has become uncomfortable because of my feelings, I will leave. But if you can tolerate me staying, I would like to remain. There is no pressure, no expectation, just honesty between us." Beth sat very still, her face unreadable in the dim light. Then she reached out and took his hand, the way he had taken hers all those nights ago. She held it between both of hers and brought it to her heart, pressing it there. Lucas felt the beating of her heart, strong and steady, and understood what she could not say with words. She wanted him to stay. Summer came to the Utah mountains in full glory. The days were warm and bright. the nights cool and full of stars. Lucas and Beth fell into a rhythm that felt almost like a marriage in its domestic comfort. They worked together, ate together, sat together in the evenings. Lucas still slept in his small room, respecting the boundary between them, but that boundary was growing thinner. One afternoon, Lucas was working on expanding the chicken coop when he heard a sound he had not heard in all his time at the homestead. Laughter. He turned to see Beth playing with a stray cat that had wandered onto the property, dangling a piece of string while the cat leaped and batted at it. Her face was alight with genuine joy, and the sound of her laughter, even silent laughter that was more breath than sound, was beautiful. Lucas set down his tools and walked over. The cat, a scrawny orange tabby, looked at him with suspicious eyes. "Looks like you have made a friend," Lucas said. Beth nodded, still smiling, and scooped up the cat. It protested briefly, then settled in her arms, purring. She looked at Lucas with a question in her eyes. "Of course it can stay," Lucas said. "Every homestead needs a good cat for the mice." Beth's smile widened and she mouthed the word "thank you." It was the first time Lucas had seen her even attempt to form words, and his heart leaped. That evening, with the cat curled between them on the porch, Lucas talked about his dreams. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future. I have been a courier for 7 years now, ever since I recovered from losing my family. It was good work, kept me moving, kept me from staying in one place and remembering too much. But I think I might be ready to settle now, to build something permanent." He glanced at Beth. "There is good land around here. A man could raise horses, maybe some cattle. There is a market for both with the mines operating. It would be hard work, but honest work." Beth was watching him intently, and he saw understanding in her eyes. He was talking about staying, not just for weeks or months, but permanently. He was talking about building a life here. She reached out and touched his face, her hand gentle against his cheek. Lucas closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When he opened them again, she was still watching him, and he saw in her expression something that made his breath catch. It was not just gratitude or companionship. It was the beginning of love. "Beth," he whispered, "I know it has not been long, I know you need time. But I need you to know that I am falling in love with you. Not with who you might become when the grief passes, but with who you are right now. Your strength, your gentleness, your resilience. The way you tend your garden with such care. The way you listen when I talk. The way you have let me into your silence." A tear slid down Beth's cheek, but she was smiling. She leaned forward slowly, giving him time to move away, and pressed her forehead to his. They sat that way, breathing together as the sun set and the stars emerged. 2 months after Lucas first arrived at the homestead, Beth spoke. They were working together in the garden, harvesting vegetables, when Lucas made a joke about a particularly stubborn carrot. Beth laughed, that same nearly silent laugh, and then she said, "Stubborn," her voice rusty from disuse, barely more than a whisper but unmistakably a word. Lucas froze, the carrot forgotten in his hand. "Beth," she looked at him, and tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Stubborn," she said again, her voice a little stronger. "Like you." Lucas dropped the carrot and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. She wrapped her arms around him and buried her face in his shoulder, and he felt her body shaking with sobs. But these were different tears. These were healing tears. "You do not have to force it," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. "The words will come when they are ready." "I want to," Beth whispered against his shoulder. "I want to talk to you. There is so much I want to say." They stayed in the garden holding each other while the cat wove around their legs and the chickens scratched in the dirt nearby. When they finally pulled apart, Beth kept hold of Lucas's hands. "I loved him," she said slowly, each word deliberate. "Thomas, I loved him so much. And when he died, it felt like all the words died with him. like there was no point in speaking in a world where he was not there to hear me. "I know," Lucas said gently. "But you," Beth continued, her voice gaining strength, "you did not push. You did not demand. You just stayed. You gave me silence and space and work for my hands. You gave me time. You were worth waiting for," Lucas said. Beth smiled through her tears. "I am falling in love with you, Lucas Ward. I think I have been falling for weeks now, and it does not feel like a betrayal of Thomas. It feels like choosing to live again, like honoring what he would have wanted for me." Lucas cupped her face in his hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Beth breathed. "Please." Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, flavored with tears and sunshine and the rich smell of earth from the garden. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Over the next weeks. Beth's voice grew stronger, though she still favored silence more often than not. But now the silence between them was different. It was chosen, comfortable, full of communication that needed no words. They spoke when they wanted to, when they had something to say, and were silent when silence felt right. Lucas wrote to his employer in Salt Lake City, officially resigning from his position as a courier. He then began making inquiries about purchasing land adjacent to Beth's homestead. The property was owned by a rancher who had been looking to sell, and with his savings and some borrowed money from the bank in Park City, Lucas was able to make the purchase. One evening in early fall, with the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides, Lucas got down on one knee on the porch where they had spent so many quiet evenings. "Beth Donovan," he said, his heart pounding. "I know we have only known each other for 4 months. I know that is not long by most standards, but I feel like I have known you forever. I know your silences and your sorrows. I know your strength and your gentleness. And I love all of it. I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Beth looked at him with eyes full of love and tears. "Yes," she said clearly. "Yes, Lucas, I will marry you." They were married in late September in a small ceremony at Martha and Robert Chen's ranch, with a dozen friends from Park City in attendance. Beth wore a simple dress of pale blue, and Lucas wore his best clothes with a new hat he had purchased for the occasion. The justice of the peace from town performed the ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Beth as the assembled guests cheered. At the reception afterward, Martha pulled Beth aside while the men were discussing horses and mining news. "I am so happy for you, dear," Martha said, her eyes wet. "Thomas would be happy too. He would want you to find love again to build a good life." "I know," Beth said softly. "I will always love him. He will always be part of my story, but Lucas is my future." "That Lucas is a good man," Martha said. "The way he stayed with you gave you what you needed. That is real love right there." The newlyweds returned to the homestead as the sun set, riding side by side on their horses. The orange cat, which Beth had named Copper, greeted them at the door with loud meows about being left alone all day. Lucas scooped up the cat and handed it to Beth, then lifted her into his arms, cat and all, and carried her over the threshold. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Lucas was patient and careful, and Beth met him with equal parts nervousness and eagerness. They learned each other slowly, taking their time, and when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Beth's, now there, bed, and talked long into the night about their dreams and plans for the future. "I want to expand the garden next spring," Beth said, her head on Lucas's chest. "Make it big enough that we could sell vegetables in town." Martha said there is always demand, especially for fresh produce. "That is a fine idea," Lucas said, stroking her hair. "And I want to start building up a herd of horses. There is good grazing on the land I purchased, and I have always had a way with horses. Children? Beth asked quietly. Do you want children? Yes, Lucas said without hesitation. If we are blessed with them, yes. Do you? I do, Beth said. I think I would like that very much. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, with Copper curled at the foot of the bed, and the sound of the wind in the pines outside the window. The first year of their marriage was full of hard work and deep joy. Lucas proved to be as good with horses as he claimed, and by spring he had purchased 4 mares and a fine stallion. Beth's garden flourished, expanded to 3 times its original size, and she began selling produce in Park City every week. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk, building their life together. That winter, Beth discovered she was pregnant. She told Lucas on a snowy evening in December as they sat by the fire with Copper purring on her lap. "Lucas," she said, "I have news." He looked up from the harness he was mending. "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." Lucas dropped the harness, a smile breaking across his face like sunrise. He crossed to her in 2 strides and knelt before her chair, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he breathed. "Beth, that is wonderful. How are you feeling? Are you well?" "I am well," she said, laughing at his sudden worry. "Martha has been helping me. She says I am healthy and strong and should have no problems." Lucas pulled her into a careful embrace. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Beth asked, even though she could see the answer in his face. "I am more than happy," Lucas said. "I am blessed beyond measure." The baby, a boy they named Thomas Robert Ward, was born in August of 1883 during a fierce thunderstorm that rolled down from the mountains and shook the cabin with thunder. Martha attended the birth along with the doctor from town, and though the labor was long and difficult, both Beth and the baby came through healthy. When Lucas first held his son, looking down at the tiny red face and shock of dark hair, he felt his eyes fill with tears. This was a new beginning, a new life built on the foundation of loss and grief but reaching toward hope and joy. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered. "Welcome to the world, son." Beth watched from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "He looks like you," she said softly. "He looks like himself," Lucas said. Perfect and new and full of possibility. As Thomas grew, the homestead grew with him. Lucas's horse business thrived, and he became known throughout the region as someone who could train even the most difficult animals. Beth's garden continued to expand, and she began preserving and selling her produce year-round. They added onto the cabin, building 2 more bedrooms and expanding the main living area. When Thomas was 2 years old, Beth became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Catherine, after Lucas's sister and Beth's favorite flower. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister and would sit for hours watching her sleep, his little hand gentle on her blanket. The years passed in a rhythm of work and family, seasons and celebrations. They hosted gatherings at their home, dinners with the Chens and other friends from Park City. They attended church services in town and helped their neighbors when times were hard. Lucas taught Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and Beth taught both children to read using books she ordered from back east. In 1889, when Thomas was 6 and Rose was 3, Beth told Lucas she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin boys they named James and Samuel. The cabin suddenly felt full of noise and chaos and life, and Lucas and Beth often looked at each other across the dinner table, surrounded by their children, and smiled at how far they had come from that silent spring day when a lonely cowboy had stopped for water and found something worth staying for. One evening, after the children were all asleep, Lucas and Beth sat on their porch as they had done for years now. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the sound of the creek babbling nearby was peaceful. "You ever think about that first day?" Lucas asked. "When I rode up and you were standing in the garden all the time," Beth said, leaning against his shoulder. "I was so lost then, so deep in grief I could not see any way forward. And now I am found," Beth said simply. "You found me, Lucas. Not by pulling me out of my grief, but by sitting with me in it. By giving me silence when I needed it and patience when I could not speak. You showed me that it was possible to love again, to live again, without forgetting what I had lost." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "You saved me too, you know. I was drifting before I met you, moving from place to place, never settling, never letting myself feel too much. You taught me that it was safe to stay, to build, to love." "We saved each other," Beth said. "In the silence we found each other." As the years continued to pass, the Ward family became a cornerstone of the Park City community. Thomas grew into a fine young man who shared his father's way with horses. Rose became a teacher, educating children in the growing town. James took over managing the expanded garden and produce business, while Samuel became fascinated with mining engineering and went to study in Denver. Lucas and Beth grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative, had buried friends and celebrated births, had struggled through hard winters and rejoiced in abundant harvests. Through it all, they had each other. In the spring of 1902, 20 years after their first meeting, Lucas and Beth took a rare day away from work and family. They rode up into the mountains to a spot Lucas had discovered years before, a meadow full of wildflowers with a view of the valley below. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching clouds drift across the brilliant blue sky. 20 years, Beth said, wonder in her voice. "It seems impossible that so much time has passed. And yet here we are," Lucas said, taking her hand. His hair was gray now, his face lined with years of sun and wind, but his eyes when he looked at her were the same as they had been that first day. Still together, still in love, still choosing each other every day, Beth agreed. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and her hands were weathered from years of garden work, but her smile was the same smile that had first broken through her grief all those years ago. "Lucas, I want you to know something. I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest joy of my life. You gave me back the world when I thought I had lost it forever. And you gave me a reason to stay in one place," Lucas said. "A reason to build instead of run. A home." They made love there in the meadow, gentle and sweet and full of 2 decades of intimacy and understanding. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms and talked about their children, their grandchildren, their dreams for the future. "You ever regret it?" Beth asked quietly. "Stopping that day, staying? You could have had a different life, traveled more, seen more of the world." "Never," Lucas said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life with you, with our family, is better than anything I could have imagined. You are my world, Beth Ward. You always have been." As the sun began to set, they rode back down the mountain toward home. Smoke was rising from the cabin chimney, which meant Thomas and his wife were starting dinner. They could hear the laughter of grandchildren playing in the yard, the sound of life and love and family. Lucas helped Beth dismount, his hands steady on her waist, and they stood for a moment just looking at the homestead. It had grown so much from that first day, expanded and improved and made beautiful through years of work and care. But underneath all the changes, it was still the same place where a grieving woman and a silent cowboy had found each other. "Home," Beth said softly. "Home," Lucas agreed, and hand in hand, they walked toward the warmth and light of the cabin where their family waited. The seasons continued to turn, and the Ward family continued to grow. Thomas married and had 4 children. Rose married a banker from Salt Lake City and had 3 children. James married a girl from Park City and took over the entire produce business, expanding it to supply several towns. Samuel returned from Denver with a degree in engineering and a wife, and they settled nearby with their growing family. Lucas and Beth became beloved grandparents, always ready with stories and wisdom, and the kind of unconditional love that comes from having weathered life's storms together. They were fixtures in Park City, known for their kindness and generosity, for the way they supported the community and helped those in need. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1907, the entire family gathered at the homestead for a celebration. There were now 14 grandchildren ranging from infants to teenagers, along with sons and daughters-in-law, and close friends like Martha and Robert Chen, both now elderly but still spry. As the party wound down and the grandchildren were put to bed in various corners of the expanded cabin, Lucas and Beth slipped away to their porch. It was a warm September night, much like the night they had been married all those years ago. 25 years, Lucas marveled. A quarter of a century. The best 25 years of my life, Beth said. Thank you, Lucas, for stopping that day, for staying, for loving me. Thank you for letting me, Lucas said, for trusting me with your silence and your grief, for building this life with me. They sat in companionable silence, as they had done thousands of times before, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The sounds of their family settling down for the night drifted through the cabin windows. Someone was singing a lullaby, soft and sweet. Someone else was laughing quietly at a joke. "We did good, did we not?" Beth asked. "We did very good," Lucas agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." As they sat together, Lucas thought back to that first day, riding up to a small homestead with nothing but a need for water and supplies. He had found so much more than that. He had found purpose and love and home. He had found a woman lost in grief and had been privileged to witness her healing, to be part of her return to life. And in helping her, he had healed something in himself that he had not even known was broken. Beth leaned her head on his shoulder and Lucas wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. They had grown older, their bodies no longer young and strong, but their love had only deepened. It was a love built on shared silence and shared work, on patience and understanding, on choosing each other every day for 25 years. "I love you, Beth Ward," Lucas said into the darkness. "I love you, Lucas Ward," Beth replied. "Today and always." The years continued, and though age eventually slowed them down, Lucas and Beth remained active and engaged with their family and community. They celebrated the marriages of their grandchildren and the births of great-grandchildren. They marked anniversaries and birthdays, holidays and ordinary days that became special simply because they were together. In the winter of 1915, Lucas became ill with pneumonia. The doctor from Park City, now a younger man who had taken over from the old doctor, came to treat him and warned that recovery would be difficult given Lucas's age. He was now 59 years old, and the illness hit him hard. Beth nursed him day and night, sitting by his bedside, holding his hand, talking to him when he was awake and keeping vigil when he slept. Their children came to visit, bringing their children and grandchildren. The cabin was full of family, full of love, full of the life that Lucas and Beth had built together. Lucas recovered, though it took weeks and left him weaker than before. When he was finally able to sit up and then to walk around the cabin, Beth wept with relief. "I am not ready to lose you," she said, holding him carefully. I need more years with you, many more years. I am not going anywhere yet, Lucas promised. I still have too much life to live with you, and he kept that promise. Though his strength never fully returned to what it had been, Lucas continued to work with the horses he loved, teaching his grandchildren and great-grandchildren the skills he had honed over a lifetime. Beth continued to tend her garden, now with more help from family members but still insisting on having her hands in the soil. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. They saw the world change around them, automobiles becoming more common, electricity coming to Park City, new inventions and new ways of life. But at their core, they remained the same, a cowboy and a grieving woman who had found each other in silence and built a love worth living. On a spring morning in 1922, 40 years after they first met, Beth woke to find Lucas watching her with soft eyes. "Good morning," she said, smiling. Her hair was completely white now, her face deeply lined, but her eyes were still the same brown eyes that had been empty with grief all those years ago and now sparkled with contentment. "Good morning, my love," Lucas said. His voice was rougher now, his movements slower, but the love in his eyes had never dimmed. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky how?" "Lucky that I stopped for water that day. Lucky that you let me stay. Lucky that I got to spend 40 years loving you and being loved by you." Beth reached out and touched his face, her hand gentle on his weathered cheek. "The luck was mine, Lucas Ward. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You showed me that grief does not have to be the end, that love can bloom even in the darkest soil." They rose and went about their morning routine, moving slowly but in perfect synchronization after 40 years of shared mornings. They fed Copper's great-great-grandcat, a marmalade feline named Honey. They made coffee and breakfast. They sat on the porch and watched the sun rise over the mountains they had lived among for 4 decades. Their son Thomas came by later that morning with news that his youngest daughter had just given birth to twins, making Lucas and Beth great-great-grandparents for the first time. "Twins!" Beth exclaimed, delighted. "A boy and a girl, you said?" "Yes, Ma," Thomas confirmed. He was 54 now, his own hair graying, his own children grown with families. "They are naming the boy Luke after Pa and the girl Bethany after you." Lucas felt his eyes fill with tears. To have their names carried forward another generation, to know that their legacy would continue in these new lives, was almost overwhelming. "That is a great honor," he managed to say. "You two set the example for all of us," Thomas said, looking at his parents with deep affection. "The way you love each other, the way you have built this family, the way you have lived your lives, we all want to live up to that." After Thomas left, Lucas and Beth sat together on the porch, holding hands. "We have been blessed," Beth said softly. "So deeply blessed." "Yes," Lucas agreed. "More than we ever deserved." "We deserved it," Beth said firmly. "After what we both lost, after the grief we carried, we deserve to find this happiness." Lucas brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are right, and I am grateful every day that we found it together." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, they sat in the comfortable silence that had been the foundation of their relationship from the very beginning. A silence that was not empty but full, not lonely but companionable, not an absence but a presence all its own. The years that followed were gentler, slower, but no less full of love. Lucas and Beth spent their days surrounded by family, tending their much reduced garden and small stable, sitting on their porch and watching the world go by. They told stories to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the old days, about how they met, about the years of building their life together. The story of how Lucas had stopped for water and stayed for love became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. It became a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that patience and silence could heal, that choosing to stay could be the bravest thing a person could do. On a perfect autumn day, in 1925, Lucas and Beth celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. The entire family gathered once again, now so large that they had to hold the celebration outside. There were children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren everywhere, 4 generations of the family that Lucas and Beth had created. As the sun set and the celebration continued around them, Lucas and Beth slipped away one last time to their porch. They sat in their familiar spots, holding hands, watching the stars emerge. 40 years, Beth said. 43 if you count from the day we met. Almost half a century, Lucas. The best years of my life, Lucas said. Every single one of them. Mine too, Beth said. She was quiet for a moment, then added, I never thought I would be this happy again. After Thomas died, I thought happiness was over for me, but you showed me I was wrong. You showed me that the heart has more capacity than we know, that love can be found again, that life can be rebuilt. You taught me the same things, Lucas said. You taught me that staying in one place, building roots, creating a family, those things were not traps but gifts. You taught me that silence could be powerful, that patience could heal, that love was worth the risk. They sat in silence for a while longer, the comfortable silence of 2 people who had shared a lifetime together and no longer needed words to communicate. The sounds of their family celebrating drifted over them, the laughter and music and joy they had created together. No regrets, Beth asked, as she had asked before over the years. Not a single one, Lucas answered, as he always did. You? Only that we did not have even more time, Beth said. But I am grateful for every moment we have had. As am I, Lucas said. As am I. They stayed on the porch late into the night, long after the celebration had wound down and their family had gone to sleep. They sat under the stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love and all the years since, holding hands and simply being together. When they finally went inside, they passed through rooms full of sleeping children and grandchildren, through the cabin that had grown from a simple structure to a sprawling home full of life and love. They went to their bedroom, the same room where Beth had slept alone in her grief all those years ago, and climbed into bed together. Good night, my love, Lucas whispered, pulling Beth close. Good night, my heart, Beth replied, settling into his arms. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, as they had done for 40 years, safe in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. In a moment of shared silence, on a spring day in 1882, they had found each other. In the quiet, they had built a love worth living. And that love had sustained them through 4 decades, through joy and sorrow, through struggle and triumph, through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a life. The story of Lucas and Beth Ward became part of the history of Park City, Utah. Long after they were gone, people would tell the tale of the silent cowboy and the grieving widow who found love in the most unexpected way. Their descendants would carry on their legacy, passing down the values of patience, kindness, hard work, and unconditional love that Lucas and Beth had exemplified. The homestead where it all began remained in the family for generations, a testament to what could be built when 2 broken people found each other and chose to heal together. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the pines and the stars shone bright over the Utah mountains, those who knew the story could almost see them there on the porch, Lucas and Beth Ward, sitting in comfortable silence, holding hands, their love as enduring as the mountains themselves. Their story was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer someone in pain is simply your presence. That silence, when shared with the right person, can speak louder than words. That grief does not mean the end of love, but can be the soil from which new love grows. And that a moment of kindness, a decision to stop and stay, can change the entire course of a life. Lucas had stopped for water and found a lifetime. Beth had lost her voice to grief and found it again through love. Together, they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something that proved that even in the harsh landscape of the Wild West, even after devastating loss, hope and love could flourish. As the years passed and the 20th century progressed, bringing changes that would have been unimaginable to Lucas and Beth when they first met, their story endured. It was a story of resilience and hope, of patience and healing, of the power of presence and the strength of silence. It was a story of two people who found each other when they needed it most and built a love that lasted not just a lifetime, but generations. And in the end, that was their legacy. Not just the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren they left behind, not just the successful businesses and the beautiful homestead, but the lesson they taught through their lives. That love, when built on a foundation of patience, respect, and shared silence, could weather any storm and last forever. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. And that in the quiet moments, in the spaces between words, that is where the deepest connections are forged and the truest love is found.